All righty. Welcome back, everyone. We're about to get an update from Nolan, who went to the opening ceremonies yesterday of Humanity Rising at Ubiquity University.
Yeah, it went well. Jim Garrison opened and led. Jane Goodall had some very powerful things to say. The leader of TED, famous for TED Talks, I'm forgetting his name, but he spoke as well and also had great things to say. I didn't get to catch all of it, but seemed like a good opening. And Jamen and I and James were just checking out the schedule. It's meant to be ongoing until the pandemic ends. Their schedule goes through August with weekly themes. And we could review those again if you'd like, Jamin.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's give it a quick review.
Just to clarify, like it is basically around like what are they planning on achieving now in this? They're coming up with what are they getting together to do exactly? Because they're finishing. You said they're at it's on as long as the pandemic lasts. You were saying, but what about after the pandemic lasts? The pandemic's only one of our problems. We've got some major problems to be dealing with. Do we just disband after we think the pandemic is sorted and everything's cool? I don't think so. There's still a lot of talking to be done.
Well,
Sorry
they
for that,
state that the goal of the summit is to create an international coalition strong enough to transform conversations that matter into actions that make a difference.
Well, I would like to offer that they modify that to the goal of the summit is to save life on Earth. Right? I'd say we need to save life on Earth much more urgently than we need another coalition. So the goal is not I think they got the wrong goal. A coalition is a tool, a structure to achieve the goal, right? So the first gift I'd like to offer to Humanity Rising is an updated goal. The goal is saving life on Earth. And does that goal need clarification? Yes. Right? Whose lives are we going to save? Are we seeking to save just humanity or all of life? All of life, clearly. Anyway, I'm just saying that needs clarification. But if you say save life on Earth, everyone knows what you're talking about. People know the difference between a live animal running through the forest and a dead animal that's been run over by a truck. We all know the difference. We're talking about the former. We want life. Okay, carry on, Nolan.
So starting May 22nd, Summit will launch an ongoing global dialogue and coalition of activists and organizations which will consider ideas and take action on proposals to create a world that is more socially equitable and ecologically regenerative. The summit will continue for as long as the pandemic lasts. This is important because world events are changing every day, and it is imperative that we interact with events as they unfold. The world will shapeshift many times over the next months. We must be in a position to continue to adapt and evolve as the global situation does.
Well, I mean, some of the wording certainly sounds right and encouraging anyway. Like they seem to be there for the right reasons in a sense. Like, but I also don't get the idea of just as long as the pandemic raises, it's not our only issue anyway for one. But like, I hope it doesn't sound like, or it doesn't end up like another COP25, like another failed COP. You know what I mean? A load of world leaders get together to look good and look at this. We're really doing something here, but in the end, absolutely nothing was achieved. They all dispersed, and nothing is, you know, we're more or less back in, if not, we're in a worse situation than we were before the COP25. Like, everything's exponentially growing. Like, so I just don't get this idea. We'll drop it after the pandemic lasts. Like, with far more serious issues that the pandemic is only one symptom of.
Yeah, but by comparison, we're going to continue having this block party every week, 24 hours a week, until we either save life on Earth or we're dead. There's no other inflection point that's interesting to me. We either save life on Earth or we die, right? But there's no like, oh, when this one virus pandemic is over, then we're good. See, that for me, these are indications of what their underlying context is, right? And like a couple of minutes ago, you read, you know, a more equitable world. Like, oh yeah, if we just get 10% more equitable, then we're there, and then we can call it good. All right? No, see, so one offering I'd like to make to Humanity Rising, Ubiquity University, is the offering of a conversation, what we call the conversation, which is how do we save life on Earth? And the way that we see that conversation happening now, the appropriate form that conversation needs to take, in my view, is we need to talk about what we call hyper solutions, big planetary scale solutions. We need to put them on the board and move these giant pieces around, not little tweaks here and there, but the big stuff, like feeding everyone, like forming a planetary collective superintelligence, right? Like cooling the planet through solar radiation management in time. So we have a hyper solution, and which we'd like to talk about, but that comes after the conversation. So first we need to have the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? And I think even before that, we need to address what I'm calling the pre-conversation, which is why the heck are we avoiding the conversation as a species? We're not avoiding it here at the block party. We get right into it every single week and address it. What my question right now is the pre-conversation, why the heck are we so alone here in having the conversation and asking the question, how do we save life on Earth? And demanding big solutions of ourselves. Big solutions like operations. Yeah, go ahead, James.
No, I'm just saying that is the key question. Why the heck are we so alone here? Like, you know, that is one big question that needs to be answered. Like, well, why is it that such devastating situations are confronting us now? Like, and the majority of the world's going around as if there was a blindfold over their faces. Like, they have no idea what's going on. Why is that? That's the question. But we just can't go on and ignore that it's happening either. We're not ostriches. You know what I mean? We can't just bury our heads in the sand.
Yeah. And so going back to, you know, Humanity Rising's stated goal of building a coalition, which will then support, you know, a conversation, what if we started with the conversation? How do we save life on Earth? Have that conversation, keep having that conversation until we start to gravitate towards some consensus here or some consensus there or consensus wherever. But then once we've started to have that conversation and start to form either one hyper strategy or multiple, one hyper solution or multiple hyper solutions, then we can say, okay, good. Now that we've got this idea of what we need to do, now we can talk about the coalition that we need to build to facilitate that, because now we have a clear goal, a clear strategy, a clear something. But until we have the conversation, if our goal is to build a coalition, well, we all know how to do that. Shoot, we've been building coalitions for millennia. That's not hard. Let's build a coalition. Great. Mission accomplished. We've got the coalition. Woo! Great. Let's go back to business as usual. The missing coalition has been formed. No, we need to get clear on the goal. We need to have the conversation. And we first need to see, why is it why are we avoiding the conversation? And I think the reason is obvious. And I look at the list of speakers, these are privileged people. And one of the things about privileged people who've got a little bit too much privilege or too much success, what we call success in the old paradigm, right, is we have a very hard time imagining this all coming to an end. I mean, when I hear and read about Humanity Rising, I get much more of a sense of, okay, look, you're driving across the country, make sure you stop to top off your fluids and get regular oil changes and fill the gas tank, and we'll just keep rolling just fine, right? And we'll keep doing that until we get to our destination, until the pandemic's over, and then we're back to business as usual and everything's fine. Versus the conversation as I see it is, holy shit, we're almost at the edge of the cliff. We need to figure out something now. What is the hyper solution? Is it slamming on the brakes? Is it a hard turn to the right? There was a time when my dad's brakes failed. He was driving, me and my brother were in the back seat. He was driving us home from Yosemite, the great famous national park. And we're going down this steep road called Old Priest's Grade. And it's an old, steep, rocky road. They've since built a more modern highway. But there we are going down Old Priest's Grade, and the brakes start to fail, okay? And we're going down, okay? What did my dad do? He had to think fast at the level of hyper solutions. Okay, slamming on the brakes, that's not doing it. You know the hyper solution he came up with? He turned the car to the left and rubbed against the side of the mountain. And that's how he brought the car to a stop. He rubbed it against the side of the mountain. See, that's a hyper solution in the appropriate time, which is now. He didn't say, and this was before cell phones, but imagine it wasn't. Hey, yeah. Now, what do I do? I'm like, speed is increasing and it's increasing and it's increasing and what? You know, that's where we're at right now. There's one conversation to have. What do we need to do right now to stop the descent into hell? What do we need to do to save life on Earth? That's the gift I'd like to give Humanity Rising and Ubiquity University, is an intense focus on what we call the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? That is the real game that we need to play right now. And the action in the arena is having a conversation about different possible hyper solutions, different possible total solutions. Like, for example, Operation Stone Soup. Feed everyone, go collectively super intelligent, cool the planet. That's the mega strategy within the hyper solution called Operation Stone Soup. Operation Stone Soup consists of a number of specific solutions and a mega strategy, read story, that ties it all together. That people can say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Great, let's build a coalition around that. And that's exactly what we're doing by building a community of communities, of feeder communities. We're going right to the very first phase, feed everyone, and we're addressing that. So for us, we've had the pre-conversation, we've had the conversation, we've come up with a hyper solution, and we're working on its implementation. So that's a gift of an example I'd like to offer Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising. is that example. Now, if and when we all embrace the conversation, we might come up with different hyper solutions. And that's what we need. We need a bunch of different hyper solutions so that we can compare and contrast and find the very best one.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, like you said, we've had a bunch of conversation. We've had thousands of hours of conversation now at this stage. Like, and you've been at this like for a couple of years now. Like, I will do, you know, the majority of you have. Like, that's why I don't get the idea that we can just do this for so long, and then we'll, you know, they're putting a time limit on the conversation, and let's come up with a few solutions and we'll head off. I mean, your father didn't turn around to all you guys in the back of the car and go, we'll have a few conversations about this situation here and see if we can come up with a solution. You know what I mean? No, he didn't. Like, he just jumped into the solution, instant thought, as you said. Like, well, there's a lot of ideas on the table. We've had a lot of conversation, but as you said, we still need a lot of other voices in that conversation. We can't think of everything ourselves. Nobody can. Like, I mean, we need many, many heads put together, but heads that are actually in the conversation. Like, too much time has gone by wasting now pussyfooting around this situation. Like, there are too many issues facing us that, as I said, that the pandemic's only a small, minute symptom of. And as you said, time is running out. Even the IPCC admitted like that we have 2030 before we go into all the irreversible situations and you know, the different scenarios that can start to occur. I think like they know themselves. That's given themselves a bit of time. Those situations are already falling and happening at the moment all over the world. Like, these climate situations that are happening all over the world as we speak. There's no one, like, again, we humans say, we'll put a time on that and we'll sort that out by that time. Like, the 2030 has been taken as if, well, we're all right till then. So again, are we? No, we're not. We're going to be fucked by this. Sorry, like, we're going to be in the right situation by 2030. Irreversible completely altogether. No coming back from. Too late to have the conversation time. So we need to get to this. We need to just encourage people into the conversation. Please come into the conversation. You know what I mean? And let's put our heads together once and for all.
Totally. I would love for all of us to get together and have the conversation. And let's find ways to really extend this invitation to Humanity Rising at Ubiquity University. And in the meantime, I can tell you one place where the conversation is happening, and that's right here at the Block Party every Friday, Saturday, and at the Solution Club every Tuesday, both of which can be found on radish.org. Everyone is welcome. And the rules are very simple. And yes, we have the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? And we explore different possible hyper solutions to achieve that. And we're working on those. And we're feeling very alone here in having the conversation. We think the world should be having the conversation. We think the conversation should be dominating the nightly news. How do we save life on Earth? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Let's have the bleeping conversation. Let's get over it already that we're in a death spiral, very close to death. Let's get over it. That's the reality. You know, what did my dad not do? What he didn't do was say, oh shit, this is so unfair. Damn it. Ah! And then I wouldn't be here to have the conversation. No, he said, all right, I got to think fast. I got to come up with something. But death is not a good option here. All right, I'll fuck up the car, but save our lives. And that's what he did. He fucked up the car and he saved our lives. It's time for us to mess up the car. See, and it's like, yeah, go ahead, James.
No, I'm just saying, and therein lies the simple answer. Like, he fucked up the car and saved your lives. The thing is that it's not even a case of us being able to fuck up the car and save our life. Like, our car is the planet. You know what I mean? But
right. But
the planet's still going to carry on without us. So if we fuck up, we fucked ourselves up and most of other life. Like.
Right. But in the analogy that I'm saying, messing up the car is not messing up the planet. The car is incidental. What I'm saying in my analogy, the car is this culture of looking good and pretending that we've got this all under control, and look, just calm down, everybody. We're going to have a conference. We've got this nice roster of speakers. Let's go through them one at a time. Everybody be polite. And nobody point out the elephant in the room that we're almost dead. Please, that would be impolite. And we don't want to scare people. You know, I once challenged a couple of years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, I sent an invitation to one of my professors at UC Berkeley of environmental engineering, very well-known, well-renowned Professor Bill Nazaroff. And I said, Bill, you know, in an email, hey, please join the conversation. And I'd love to have you as a speaker at a Sierra Club dinner. Here's what we're doing. We got Guy McPherson coming, da-da-da-da-da. And he basically responded that he doesn't think it's a good idea to scare people, right? And he's going to keep doing his thing, his research and teaching classes and all that, but he doesn't want to scare the public or, you know. So for me, messing up the car is actively saying, you know what, screw it. Let's have the conversation and let's get over it. And if we scratch up our egos a bit in the process, so be it. Right? You know, one of the things that pisses me off about just these gatherings generally, not ours, but these big production gatherings with these big ticket speakers like Jane Goodall and Charles Eisenstein and all these good folks, is I get the impression that a lot of these people are out there to make a good speech and sell some more books and get a nice applause and have people say, oh, that was so sweet, right? Messing up the car is saying, listen, can we just get rid of all that crap? This isn't about our egos. Can we sit down and have a face-to-face adult conversation about how do we save life on Earth? What are the candidate hyper solutions? Let's put them on the table, figure out the very best one, and then build a coalition around that. See, that's a coalition I can believe in.
Yeah, I think you made a very valuable point there, actually. You have to, I have no doubt that all these people have their minds and their thinkings in the right place in regards to what their fields of interest are and how all their different fields of interest relate to the general topic that we're on about, the climate situation and the pandemic situation and all the situations that are occurring because of the climate situation. And yes, though they may all have their, mind in the right place, I definitely get that impression. A lot of them are along for that kind of ride as well, like they maybe promote a book or something like that anyway. But even if it's just to give another speech, I don't know. Because if they are in the know, as we are in the know about what's really going on, but they're skipping that part of the conversation, well, then there's a lot more you just said there about what they're just there for, because primarily they have to know what the truth of the situation is, but yet they're willing to go along for this and take part in it, but still not have the conversation and still not tell the truth, all because they're afraid of making people feel afraid of a scary story. Well, what's worse than a scary story? You know what I mean? Not telling them anything.
Oh yeah. So go ahead. So please.
Okay. It's over a year ago. I went to this. I don't know. It was at one of the universities in London. It was a talk by Dr. Rupert Reed. Now he's kind of on the edge of Extinction Rebellion. He was giving a talk, and what was quite interesting was at the end of the talk, during the questions and answers, all these very prim and proper people were, I don't know whether they seemed prim and proper. They were there listening. And then he suddenly said, you lot, he said, I know you've got extra houses. He says, you come here, you come to these talks. It was something along these lines. You come to these talks, but you think that's it. You've done your bit. You've arrived at the talk. You're like, he'd had it up to here with these hypocrites, and we're all stuck in this talking. We're, to an extent, we're doing it as well because Nobody's on board. It's like, you know, in the Sleeping Beauty, the prince is whacking down the hedges with a sword. He gets in, and it's everyone's asleep. Everyone's asleep. What can you do when everyone's asleep? It's sometimes I feel angry about it, and other times I'm just like, well, what, you know, it's what can you do when everyone's asleep? Why are they asleep? I don't know why they're asleep. Nobody's, you know, not enough people are listening. And also, if you're the people on the bridges, like Extinction Rebellion, you know, whatever criticism you have against them, at least they got on those bridges. They actually said, come on, let's do it. They potentially made utter fools of themselves. And they, and on top of that, people came by, walking to their jobs, were saying things like, this bunch of crazies, look at this. Bunch of hippie crazies on a bridge. You know, that's what you get for looking it in the face, looking the reality in the face. And the people who aren't looking at the reality, you know, they get the respect. So I don't know, it's mad.
Yeah, and regarding what, thank you. So I really appreciate what you're saying, because that hits the nail on the head. And this gets to what James was mentioning a couple of minutes ago, which is that, wait a second, if these people know what the reality is, why aren't they, you know, addressing it? And earlier today, about 18 hours ago, approximately, you know, I was talking with Silas, and we were talking about the K-Mama app, you know, and the conversation and hyper solutions like Operation Stone Soup. And do we take it all the way, not just feed everyone, but also go collectively super intelligent and cool the planet? And he finally came out and said, look, you know, in terms of this temperature spike that you're talking about, Jamen, if it happens, basically, if it happens, then we can deal with that. And I said, no, that's not the way it works, Silas. This is an exponential. Right? We've got early indicators that we're about to go vertical. Once we are vertical, it's over. There's nothing more to do. We're dead at that point. I
think people, it's a strange thing. People dip in and out of denial. Like they face facts and then they have a cup of tea, feel cozy, had a really nice sleep, you know, saw mama, you know, whatever. And then you dip in and dip out of it. But the thing is, we have to stay awake all the time, you know, because if people who are taking this on and are pushing to get people to take this on board and they're sometimes asleep, that's not really good enough, is it? It's we can't do that. We have to be permanently awake. I don't know, maybe it's just people have to do that in order to survive. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but you know, everybody goes in Extinction Rebellion, they talk about it as fear of death, and they talk about, have you heard about this stuff that's going around? They talk of hopium. You talked Pandora's box earlier on. You know, the hope was a bad thing because it's just wishful thinking, and it stops you from, you know, being realistic and getting on with the job. And quite often when people have the extinction talks, people are upset and they say, could you give us a line of hope, Dr. So-and-so? You know, at the end, they want their hope. They want their little cozy blanket. So, you know, and then the lecturer says, no, sorry, we don't believe in hope. And then they get the hopium lecture. It's funny, really. You've got to laugh, you know, like we're having this little talk, you know, apocalypse near, you know, and then we're all sitting around having a chat, you know, discussing it.
Yeah, they should rename the film, instead of Apocalypse Now, they should call it Apocalypse, hopefully not. You know what I mean? Because they are getting together. They're having all these hopeful conversations, yet they don't think hope is a good thing to grasp onto. If they don't think hope is a good thing to grasp onto, that means they're grasping onto the seriousness of the situation, that it doesn't even call for hope. Yet they won't talk about it. Go fucking figure that one, then.
Yeah, the context in which I've heard hopium is in basically the Guy McPherson circles, where, you know, these are people who basically say, look, there's no way out of the death spiral. We're going down, we're going to die, and anyone who's talking about solutions is smoking hopium, right?
I think that's different. I think hopium is the cozy blanket. It's like the hopium of the people, the opium of the people. Whereas solution, it doesn't. Even Guy McPherson, he always says at the end, "I'm all for solutions. Come up with a solution." He hasn't got one, but he's up for it. But the hope is like just say something nice at the end of this scary lecture, so that I can go home and sleep okay and get on with the things I normally do. I think it is different, and I like the analysis and the stripping away of what hope actually means. It's so written in our language. Oh, hope to see you later. Hope is everywhere. It's like a word that is bouncing around every minute of the day all over the world, and it's not. Realism isn't about wishful thinking. It's about solutions. It's like coming up with something, coming up with a solution, and that is not the same as hope.
Yeah, the bottom line is we need to have the conversation. That, and I don't believe in forcing it on anyone. Do you want to have the conversation or not? If you want to have the conversation, let's have the conversation. What can we do to save life on Earth? If the answer is nothing and we're all, going to die, okay, let's make peace with that. But let's at least have the conversation. See, what I see.
Do people in your circle, do they have the conversation? Everyday people you meet in your normal life, do they have the conversation?
Well, see, that's the interesting thing. I don't have a normal life anymore. I'm in social isolation. My normal life is me and Melissa, and then I spend, upwards of 30 hours per week on video conferences like this, right? So for me, this is the new normal. It is normal to have the conversation. That's the only conversation I'm really willing to have. And when Melissa and I are not, talking trash at each other, playing backgammon, taking a break from it all, right? We're deep in the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? What's it going to take? Right? And that warm, comfortable blanket of privilege, right? Pretty much everyone on the roster there is coming from privilege, and they're still living in privilege. And as Guy McPherson says, they cannot imagine it all going away. It's just like beyond their ability to imagine.
I'm going to name it. I'm going to name this phenomenon. I'm going to call them. I'm going to other them, which is supposed to be a terrible thing to do. I'm going to other them, and I'm going to call them the cozy blanketeers.
Yeah, the cozy blanketeers. That's it. The cozy blanketeers. If you've got a crisis, who are you going to call? The Three Musketeers or the cozy blanketeers? They're calling in the cozy blanketeers. And basically saying, let's pretend that we're looking at the full seriousness of this.
And write a book.
And write a book and give a talk and go on, like Charles Eisenstein, who I've met in person. I talk a little bit of trash about him because I think he needs the wake-up call. Go to any one of his talks. He'll start by just being all reverential and quiet and serious, and then he'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But what you won't see him do is say, hey, people, let's have the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? And that's the only game in town at this point, is that conversation. There's no way we're going to... Go ahead.
I've been similarly irritated by Charles Eisenstein, because I was listening to him one day because a friend recommended, and I was sort of taken in for a bit, and then I just thought, this is really talking in circles. This is like the epitome of talking in circles. And in fact, I was almost like my nerves were on edge from it. I just thought this is another form of talk crazy.
Well, he gets paid to talk. He gets paid to talk, and he gets paid to write. There's only one game in town, the real game. And it starts with the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? That's the entry point. Anything else, we're talking around in circles. It's time to have the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? And if you want examples of it, just look at recent block parties, because it's pretty much all we talk about. And what are the hyper solutions that we need?
And that group that you were speaking of, Nolan, what was the main thing you got out of it, do you think? The Humanity Rising thing.
I think they did a good job at addressing our situation from a bunch of different angles, and like a very to someone that is not familiar with these kinds of conversations, I imagine it could be extremely effective in a way that the conversation would just scare them off.
So can I interject, Nolan?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a little bit of a cartoon layer on top of this and say, okay, great. Let's get all the sheeple in the stadium. Let's get all the sheeple in the corral. Oh, and then what do we do once they're all in? We got them all in. We didn't scare them away. That's good. We got them all in. All the sheeple are in the corral. And then what do we do? See, at some point, either we have the conversation or we don't. And what I'm basically hearing is they're not having the conversation because they don't want to scare people away.
I've got the picture of the sheep in the corral. Look.
Yeah, right there, exactly. Thank you.
Do we get the sheep in the corral and tell them a bedtime story, a nice little fairy tale, and let them all go to bed tucked in nice and neat, or do we tell them the truth? And unfortunately, some of them are going to have fucking nightmares over it. But sure, Jesus, we're all having nightmares.
So,
you know what I mean?
James said they're dressed in their cozy blankets. The sheep in their cozy blankets. These sheep.
Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is I don't want to come across like sounding like we're knocking these people. No, by any means, because I'm not doing that. Cat, they're just having a mad half hour. I'm not doing that by any means, knocking anyone out. It's just that it does get very, very frustrating when you're dealing with this for a long time. No, I mean, I know that a lot of these people are all specialists in their fields and everything else, and they've careers in it, so they're dealing with it for a long time. But just in the last 5 years alone, the amount of research I've done on it, I suppose I've read most of their, or seen most of their videos or talks or whatever else, and I'm more or less up to date. We're all up to date with what the real issues are. And I'm assuming they are too. And I'm assuming it must be just as frustrating for them as well to be going out telling the soft story when they know the truth. And unfortunately, you can't just keep telling people bedtime stories and fairy tales. Like, you're going to have to upset some of the children. Some of the sheep are going to have to be upset, but we're going to have to tell them the truth of the matter. There's a big bad wolf coming. Actually, he's not.
But James, it's like you can now become a career doomer. That's your thing. You go down with your, I've got a cool, well-packaged, end of the world spiel, and I go off, and then I get a little bit of adoration from the classroom, and then I go off to the next one, and then I write an article, and then they invite me on the radio show. It's like a doomer package. It's media friendly. It's
So I'd like to call out what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing two extremes. One is the sheeple, cozy warm blanket extreme. The other is the doomer extreme, that there's nothing to do. What they both have in common is, frankly, that there's nothing to do. One says there's nothing to do because everything's fine. The other says there's nothing to do because we're going down so fast we're almost dead. There's literally nothing to do. This would be like if my dad drove off the edge of the cliff and it's like, oh shit, there's nothing to do at this point. There is no James Bond parachute for me and my boys, right? So between those two extremes, there is this extremely vulnerable middle that says, what if there is something that we can do? What might that look like? That is the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? And it's vulnerable and it's scary as bleep. And per my conversation earlier today with Silas, I am actually not convinced that most of these people, even half of them, actually get it and get how quickly we're going down. Because I think if they did, they'd say, holy shit, we got to do something. Let's have the conversation. That's the only way that I can, yeah.
I don't know, some famous person said it, but it's basic anyway, that action is the antidote to depression. So you've looked into the abyss. It doesn't matter, if you act, you don't, it's the sort of the dire misery will go away if you can act. But there are so many obstacles to our action. I mean, it's great with he's devising something. So he's faced facts, he's looking at it, and he's solving problems. So you get a lot of good feeling from doing that, But it's all of us. We have to find our bit where we're not just stuck in the talk mode. And feeding people, starting with we're fucked. Which, to be fair, the Extinction Rebellion did say that. Like they that was their motto, really. We're fucked. So that was like a moment of facing up to it. And they did act. They got on the bridges. They might have not looked at the aerosol masking effect, but they did something, credit where it's due, and they put the whole extinction thing on the media horizon. But I don't know, it's action. You can look into the abyss. You won't feel depressed if you can act.
Yeah. And just to be clear, for me, this is action, what we're doing right here. Staying up late at night, getting little to no sleep, and diving into the conversation is action. This is, we're co-creating a venue, a movement, a community to take the action of having the conversation. Out of the conversation come the hyper solutions. We then have conversations about those and ultimately pick one or more and then act on those. But we got to have conversation first. And conversation is action. I'm not imagining having this conversation. I'm in the conversation. It is action. It takes real time. It takes real energy. It takes real effort.
And as you said, between those two extremes, there's a big space, an empty space where there's nothing really, there's no conversation. The actual conversations are not going on. And we just need to fill that space, get people in to have the conversations. It's as simple as that. Because that phrase you used there, a doomer career, I've heard that. And I know where you're coming from, because I've seen that, there are people that are actually, you could see they're making a career out of it. They get, they get places, they get interviews, they get talks, they write stuff, they get made. But how ironic is that statement, a doomer career? You know what I mean? Nobody.
It's funny because
a career is a future endeavor, you know what I mean? An ongoing future.
Exactly. But also they're careering off a cliff, But
exactly.
I suppose there's the satisfaction of having a bit of, fanning your ego, and I don't know. It's just like, it reminds me of a tent. They're like tent preachers. I mean, they've been. I don't want to diss them entirely, because they've been of some use to me. They've helped me to think about things in different ways that I hadn't thought about them before. You know, they're part of the conversation, but it sort of reminds me of the, you know, the old American tent preachers. They wandered around from tent to tent all over America, you know, and it's a career, and then they get their money from that. It's how you make your money. But then again, we're stuck in capitalism, and this is, you know, we're all stuck in this capitalism cage. I call it the budgie cage. I've got a story about a budgie. Do you want to hear it? Would you like to hear my story about a budgie?
Sure.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay, there's this guy that I know, and he became very ill. He liked going to work, and then he became very ill, and he had to stay indoors all the time. And I said to him for his birthday, I'd get him a bird to keep him company. And he said he wanted a parrot, and I said, you've got to be kidding! Parrots are like 2,000 quid. I said, I'm getting you a budgie. So we managed to find a budgie shop. In this budgie shop, there was a back area. It was very dank and it smelled of grain. And there were loads of budgies in this really big cage. And he couldn't make up his mind which budgie to get. So there were several trips to the budgie shop. And then eventually he settled, being blokey, he settled on the biggest budgie. So, okay. Budgie came home. Well, first budgie came home to my place because it was too far to go to his place. It was a halfway house. So I had this budgie here. Now, all the budgies are very, very talkative. They're almost really annoying, actually. They chirp all day long. Anyway, so this budgie that he decided to call Buddy, it didn't talk anymore. It was horrendous. It was traumatized. It'd been out of a cage, missed all its friends. It'd been on a bus, and then it had come to my place, and it was so lonely. So I thought, well, what am I going to do to help this poor budgie? So I went on YouTube, and I got a big cage of budgies on YouTube, and then I took the computer up to the cage, and instantly Buddy started talking, because he was a sociable creature. Put budgie psychology on my CV, please. Anyway, so time went on, and my friend was really taken with this budgie. You know, he really enjoyed it. It was a real problem solver. But then he was getting quite addicted to budgies. So then he wanted to get another budgie. So back to the shop, and there was the most delightful budgie you ever saw. It was turquoise, and it was stylish. It was lovely, and it wasn't the biggest in the cage. It was the most stylish in the cage. So anyway, he gets this other budgie back, and he calls this other budgie Jan. So you've got Buddy and you've got Jan, and they loved each other. They were, you know, nesting up to each other in the cage. But Jan was like this amazing. He used to take Buddy out to try and give him flying lessons, but Buddy wouldn't fly. He'd just stay. He'd walk around on the floor and look confused, and have to go back into the cage. Now Jan, she was like Luke the Luke. She was the queen of. If she was a she, we couldn't tell the sex. The queen of flyers. She was looping the loop around the room and everything. And she was so lovely. From the open cage, she was trying to give Buddy flying lessons. Would he fly? Would he? Hell. There was a curtain next to the cage. Buddy used to crawl up the curtain to try and get back into the cage. And he tried to get back into the cage, but he'd done it the wrong way round, and his back was to the door of the cage. So Jan used to have to come up and rescue him. But I always think about Buddy, you know, as somebody who loves the cage. And, you know, a lot of us are like that. We're in the cage, in the capitalist cage, and we love that cage. Sorry, it was a bit of a budgie rant, but there's more to that story. It's a very sad ending. I'll tell you that another time.
You know, no, thank you for that. So, you know, this reminds me of when Jamie Gilchrist, who was on earlier today, when he and I went to the Cleveland Catholic Diocese. It took us months to get this appointment, but we got a 1-hour appointment with the Vicar General, the right hand of the bishop, This gentleman since got promoted to bishop. The bishop is now the previous bishop is now in Rome, at the Vatican. But anyway, so we're talking with the Vicar General, the number 2 guy in this giant Cleveland Catholic diocese. Cleveland is a very, very Catholic old Midwest city, which is where Rockefeller came from, is an interesting historical point. But anyway, here we are telling the Vicar General exactly what's going on with the climate, how quickly things are exponentially overheating, and what needs to happen. And I literally had Guy McPherson on standby, on speed dial. I was ready to call him and put him on speakerphone if the Vicar General needed more information or had any doubts or anything like that I couldn't answer. Guy McPherson was standing by. So we give him this whole spiel, and he looks at us and he says, you know, this is very hard to think about, which to me sounds like Buddy saying it's very hard for me to think about flying. I'm very comfortable here in the cage. I don't know about flapping around outside the cage. That looks scary to me, right? And I looked the Vicar General in the eye and I said, Father, Jamie and I can think about this because we had the good fortune of having our worlds fall apart when we were little boys. We know what it's like to have our world fall apart. We can imagine it. We can think about it. The subtext that I didn't say is you haven't. Your world didn't fall apart. You're privileged, right? And
there's something interesting in that, Jamen. I got a feeling some of these people who were choosing denial, their world did fall apart, but they stuck down there in the denial aspect of grief anyway, because they couldn't even face it during the moment when it was happening, that they went into a fantasy space in their head. Because I know some people who've had very devastating things happen to them as children, and they also, instead of it making them very awake and very aware, it led them into a life of fantasy and denial, or you know, as the opposite, as somebody who could never ever face up to reality and the truth, and who went around with rose-colored glasses on all the time. So I do think, you know, even that Vicar General, he may have had something happen, but the point is he didn't go there. He didn't deal with the crisis or face the crisis when it happened.
yeah, and we're getting to the heart of it, I think, which is, you know, what do you do when you're staring death in the face? Do you look at it or do you look away? Those are fundamentally the two options. Here we are looking at it because for whatever reasons, our life course taught us that looking away is simply not the answer. So we developed the habit of looking, right? When I was at the University of Washington campus wearing my Darth Vader costume and singing Spanish love songs to the criminal drug cartels with a giant sign, 99.9% of people just walked by. Nolan stopped and said, who are you? What's going on here? Nolan had already developed the habit of not looking away.
So he'd also developed the habit of asking questions. You know, he was interested, he was curious, and he wanted to ask the question, you know, what's going on? That's good. That's how you met Nolan, yeah?
That's how I met Nolan.
That's so cool. What a cool story.
And actually, Guy McPherson was with me on the campus that day. At the moment when Nolan met me, Guy McPherson was off doing something else and then came back.
Wow, I love that story. Nolan, yeah. And how did the relationship develop after that? Tell me.
Well, we saw each other one time, I think just one time after the first. Maybe 2 months after, something like that. And that time we spent more time talking. Jamin gave me one of his peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we sat out in the sun. Jamin in his all black Darth Vader costume, sweating his guts out. And then we didn't talk for like 2.5 years or something like that. And then Jamin emailed me about 9 months ago, and then we hopped on a phone call, and he invited me to the what was the social club, which is now the Solution Club, and it didn't used to run nearly as long. Slightly different crowd, but I thought it was awesome, and so I stuck around and talked with Jamin. After everyone else left, and Jamin and I just ended up talking like crazy. And yeah.
Well, if I can add on there, Nolan, at the first social club, right? You entered a world that you didn't know existed. And you go in, and here's all these people who are relatively awake, dialed in, and having essentially the conversation, right? Prior to that, you didn't know that the conversation was possible. You jump into it, and now it's not only possible, it's in your face. It's happening right now, and it's hella cool. Because it's dealing head on with things that actually matter, right? And it's like, whoa. And then from there, I was able to share with you more about the full vision, my vision at the time of collective superintelligence. And since you were experiencing it in the moment, it was easy for you to extrapolate from one video conference to a million video conferences happening in parallel and being all hyper connected. And that's been the dream and the vision of collective superintelligence. And it is so imminently attainable now. We're so close. See, that's the thing. People, and I'm talking to all of humanity, whoever's listening, as we embrace the conversation, hyper solutions will pop out, which are imminently achievable, right? It's like, we're a bunch of folks in the late 1800s in East Asia sucking on opium pipes in the opium den, and the opium den's on fire, and people are like, hey, we can get out and we can live. And I'm like, oh, dang, it's getting hot in here. But man, that hit of opium just felt really good. I think I'll have another. It's time to wake the fuck up and go running out of the damn opium den, even if you're naked and vulnerable and cold and whatever, and feeling prickly pain all over your body because you don't have the opium dousing it. But you know what? This will give us a chance to live. Let's jump into the damn conversation, get out from underneath your warm blankets and into the hard, cold reality of where we're at right now, which is not a pretty picture. And let's have the conversation.
Nolan, did you have a group of people who were having a kind of conversation about deep things to do with the environment and that, a little bit even, prior to meeting Jamen?
I had some friends that would venture out, but not incredibly seriously in a like it was more not it was not 100% this, but looking back it feels like it was some weird kind of intellectual kind of sadistic entertainment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I can imagine somebody making, it's probably already out there, a Duma board game where you play End of the World, on a board game. You all sit around, you have a drink, and then at the end of the evening, you go back after playing the board game. Duma, the board game, the End of the World board game.
Well, I have bad news for him anyway, because the world could be fucking ended before he finishes the game. The way I see it, Nolan, going back to the conversation we had before I fell asleep last night or this morning or whatever time it was, with ourselves, myself and yourself and Jackie and So was there and I'm after forgetting the other lady's name now. But anyway, but about your when you were on about like you were having some doubts and things like that, and you were looking at how your friends have moved on and what they're doing now, and you were questioning yourself, which is a good thing, because questioning yourself means you're putting the reins on and you're stepping back to actually reevaluate yourself and what's going on with your life. That's a great thing for a young boy your age, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. But in that conversation, the context of that conversation, you just said it yourself there again. Like when you met Jamen, as Jackie was saying last night, that was your divine intervention, I think. You know what I mean? That was because not long after that, I imagine you started to, as you said, you ended up getting burnt out in your college pursuits and started questioning where was that taking you and everything else. Like, so I think meeting Jamen was your fortuitous moment in life, like because you were already asking the questions. You just didn't realize what the context of the questions were yourself, but you were asking them, like, you know what I mean? You were curious enough to stop and ask, like, so it's all fate, man. It's all fate, and we're all heading in the right direction. Just need to get the rest of them on.
Did you drop out of college then, Nolan?
I did.
And
Yeah.
what was your subject?
Computer science.
So it's one of those areas where you can pursue that outside of the university, in the sense, is it?
Yeah, definitely. Seems like it's got to be of the easiest to pursue outside of it, because
And did you have a lot of people on your back? Oh my God, what are you doing? Like catastrophizing the fact that you sort of dropped out?
Not super bad, but the program I was in was fairly competitive. So yeah, I definitely felt that from, because I've for a while had people, hey Miles, welcome. Maybe you can't.
Miles, welcome back. I don't even know if he can hear us yet. Welcome back, Miles. All right. I love Miles's James Bond underground laboratory there. Pretty cool stuff. Anyway, back to you, Nolan. Sorry.
That's all good. For a couple of years I had people. So at the university I went to, the computer science program was like held in very high regard. It still is, and so I just that was a big part of my ego, and definitely played a big role in my social life, or just like there is some status there that yeah, the flip side of it was, well, you'd be really stupid to do something else other than completely buy into this, you know? So,
They, you know, like anybody who, you know, it's good that you keep reevaluating it. Must be quite painful. You know, should I have? You know, it's inevitable you would do that. But the thing is, anybody who separates from the group challenges the group. So your reasons for leaving it, that oh, this is our great opportunity, the computer science course, we're the privileged, we're the lucky ones, you know, we've got all these opportunities. But by you leaving that, you've left them all, you know, even if they resist it, with a big question mark. Is what we're doing really that valid? Is there another way to look at this? Is there another life? You know, so I've seen people do that over the years, choose to go away from what everybody else is doing, and it's not just painful for the person who leaves, that you leave them with a lot to deal with. It's challenging to them.
I definitely get that impression after I can't remember who said it now, but when we were talking about this earlier today, um I want to say it was James, but I was mentioning that, yeah, it was totally James. Because I was mentioning that I have a couple friends that have got themselves in very well-paying positions for their ages. Intense work, especially for one of them. And I don't know, I guess something clicked in me earlier today, thinking that even though I don't know, it's kind of like, I feel like in my situation, on paper, so to speak, I shouldn't be excited, and in their situations, they should be really excited, and motivated and at ease. And I guess I haven't thought that much about how, like, them looking at someone like me, and kind of, I don't know, I didn't really think about the the envy going the other way, um, until James mentioned it earlier. He mentioned basically that uh, it's worth considering that they're getting burnout as well, um, or like I got burnt out before I finished school, but that it's definitely not healthy for me to just assume that they're all sunshine and rainbows just because they have uh, a good paycheck right now. and presumably will have that indefinitely so long as they continue the grind, which I don't think is a joke in software. And I've like, I mean, I'm sure it depends on where you work. Certainly didn't feel like a joke in the program I was in, though. I remember for one class, I spent, me and Preston, actually, who is a really good friend of mine that still, he's going for his PhD in, he's done research in computational neuroscience at the University of Washington. He's super awesome. And we took a class together, and it was just one class. And it was, it wasn't like operating systems, but it was basically the precursor to that, a bunch of C and C++. And we spent 1 week for one class. We spent like over 45 hours on one project in like 4 days or something. And it was just ridiculous. It was so bad. And I'm
why
sure
is
that's
that?
an
Was
outlier
that because
example. But
was that because you were enthusiastic about it, or because you liked each other's company, or what? Why did you spend 45 hours?
well, we spent that long on it because that's just how long it took to finish. It wasn't, and that was like just to meet the requirements, like not, yeah. That's just how long it took.
I guess, do you miss your friends, really? You're not there all the time with your mates, is that it?
Yeah, I definitely miss my friends in the program, and I mean my main friends I'm still very much connected with, and keep up with them. It is weird though because not having the same, we don't have the same shared experience anymore. So it's not as easy to connect, but there's something also nice about that because you end up providing some kind of complementary mental and emotional nutrients for each other, coming from different places. So
I like that expression, mental and emotional nutrients. I like that. I haven't heard it put like that before. That. I'll keep that one. I'm going to put that one in the bag, Nolan.
well, Miles, how are you doing?
Oh, hi. So I'm having some technical issues. I have this headset that I bought a long time ago, and I thought should try to work with it on this other Chromebook that I have to see if I can get better audio going. So anyway, technology, it's just nuts, right? Like we've moved so quickly, and we've developed so much technology in just a short order. My brother, he was 36 years old when he died in 1993, and it was unexpected. He was in a small plane crash, and I sometimes think if he was to walk in the door, I said this to my wife Gina. I said, he would be like so bewildered, because he would be seeing me using an iPad, not even connected to the flat screen TV through Apple screen mirroring. You know, you have screen mirroring with the Apple TV. And he would be like, well, how the hell are you seeing images on this flat little device with a screen that's only this thick, and there's no wires between this thing and the TV? And then similarly, the you know, you've got all these different speakers going and Bluetooth and such. And anyway, that's just since 1993. He would have, I don't even know if they had, I don't even think cell phones were really all that common. They had big clunky phones the size of a shoe. You know, that was a cell phone when they first came out. But anyway, so that's technology, just thinking about it as I try to even plug stuff in to get the audio working. But I heard you guys talking about this Ubiquity University and the humanity rising. So I jumped over into the my web browser and I pulled it up. And there's this long list of these organizations. And I saw that Climate Healers was in there as one of the partners. So yeah, are these people going to have the conversation as you're talking about it? Because I really think, yeah, that's what Jamen said. The conversation really should be, why aren't we having the conversation? Why
That's the pre-conversation. That's what we're calling the pre-conversation. Back to you, Miles.
Okay, yeah, the pre-conversation. And I find this is the case, right? For some reason, you will present a subject to people, and they go silent. They don't want to go there, right? In a sense. And you know, one of the things for me, as you know, is long before I was worried about global warming, and then, you know, that meat and dairy is a problem, and before I knew that pandemics come from meat and dairy causes climate change, you know, I was worried about nuclear war. Well, I still am. It's you know, to say I was worried is absolutely wrong, because it's ever present. So there's when I was working for the railway, and when we were training people, another instructor, he would say, if there's a rule that you have to follow out there on the track, you know, and being out on the track is pretty dangerous. So you got to know what you're doing, and you have to have the correct authority to be out on the track. So there's a whole bunch of rules, and the instructor would say, well, you know, we have all these rules and you can't break any of them. And then some people will say, well, they do break them occasionally. There's little shortcuts taken, technically not correct and acceptable at all. And it's like, well, if you had a gun pointed at your head, would you be able to adhere to that rule? Oh yeah, okay, well, if you're gonna shoot me, I'll, you know, because the reason they're taking the shortcuts is just, oh, I don't have to really do that, and it's a little easier if I just do this, and a little more expedient if I just take this shortcut. So it's back to, well, if you had a gun pointed at your head, yeah, I could comply, I could act. So the thing is, we've got to have the conversation about, we do have a gun pointed at our head 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a gun pointed at our head. And that gun is actually what Dr. Rao calls the war machine. You know, the warfare mentality and the number of nuclear weapons, missiles that are on hair trigger alert as we speak is a gun at our head. But does anybody want to talk about that? Why is that not actually the conversation day in and day out? So, and I'm equally to blame. Just to give me a tea or whatever if I'm rambling on too long here, because I don't want to monopolize it, but let me bring the story to a conclusion. So you guys actually know my little story of when I was privileged and blessed to be able to go with my high school class to Moscow in 1976. And in 2026, that'll be 50 years ago. And I was given this card by this girl at this little event that we attended to, a postcard, and it had on the back of it, it just had peace and friendship and her name. And then she gives me the card and she says, her first thing to me, she looks me dead in the eyes and she says, "Why does your country want to destroy my country?" And I'm like, wow, what do you mean? You know, like, where are you coming from with that sort of thing? And that's not true. And, you know, you're a silly girl kind of thing. I don't know that I didn't say her, she was a silly girl, but, you know, just saying, oh, well, you know, that's not true. That's like Boulder Dash, you know? Anyway, it was disturbing, you know, just to be confronted with this thought. And then being only 16, not really having a handle on really, well, what is the truth? Is this girl telling me the truth? Or am I telling her the truth that she's out to lunch? So anyway, I actually threw that card away, as I think I've explained in a story before. I threw it away because when I got home, you know, and I actually said to my mother, told her the story, and I said, you know, she's crazy thinking that way. And of course, we had our perceptions of the Soviet Union at the time. They had their perceptions of us, and we're all like, yeah, you know, one's out to get the other. We still do live in this ridiculous mentality, which is concocted. And anyway, I threw it away, right? So that's sort of denial. That's what everybody's in right now. And we have to have the pre-conversation. Like, why can't we just talk about this? Because what I'm saying is, in the 50 years, almost 50 years since, there's been no progress. Nobody has been saying, why are we maintaining all these nuclear weapons when these Russian people are no different than us? And in fact, my heritage actually comes from, part of my family heritage comes from southern Russia, southern Ukraine, and you know, you go over there and they're very, very nice people. They you know, very pleasant. So we have to have the pre-conversation. Why can't we talk about these things and get on with it? Like, this is nuts. Like, we shouldn't. And William J. Perry, check out the Perry Project. It's not just me. This is a U.S. former Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State. I can't remember what he was. William J. Perry. He tried to dismantle nuclear weapons when the wall came down, and he was making great success. Reagan and Gorbachev almost came to an agreement in Iceland to dismantle all of them. But some asshole got a hold of Reagan at the meeting and said, "Oh, hold it." Anyway, I'm rambling along, so I'll pause, and anybody has any reflections, thank you.
Hey, James, we can't hear you. I see that you're not muted, but we can't hear you. Okay, still can't hear you, but I understand you're going to make some change, so that's cool. Yeah, he'll reconnect. That's fine. Yeah, what you're talking about was absolutely heartbreaking, Miles. Gorbachev and Reagan got so darn close. They got so darn close to stopping the production of any new nuclear weapons. But where they got held up was Reagan wanted to do Star Wars, right? And Gorbachev is like, listen, either we end this madness or we keep on with the madness. Let's end it. No new crap, right? And nope, Reagan said, nope, we're going to do Star Wars, because that was his base, Southern California, high-tech military industrial complex, all right? That's where he came from. That's his base. So it's funny. One of his speechwriters, the very speechwriter who got Reagan to say in his speech, Gorbachev, tear down this wall in Berlin, that took down the Berlin Wall. He later became U.S. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, one of the biggest proponents of legalization of cannabis. And that's where he and I connected. And we became friends, and I would go to his birthday party every year and, you know, cut him a check every year and all that good stuff. He is just a total cold warrior, right? They believe in just outgunning the former Soviet Union. And at one of his birthday parties, there was the founder and head of, I think it was General Atomics, this billionaire military industrial complex, just warmonger. And he was all excited about this new rail gun that they were creating, that would just make this other class of missiles obsolete and just be so effective. And they're just so excited, And I was just blown away. I didn't want to, get into a food fight. I was there for political reasons. And so, in fact, Elon Musk was there at that very dinner. He gave us all a warning, that basically said, listen, we're running one experiment on the one planet we have to run an experiment on. And that's very risky business, basically saying, let's see what happens if we overheat this place, and just dump all these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And, this is at a Orange County Republican dinner. Orange County is this notoriously rich Republican county in south of LA.
Yeah, I'm really surprised. This is amazing technology. So I'm a big fan of Toastmasters, and I thought, because the Toastmasters club that I have 10 minutes away from here, I really get the feeling, like, I come in and I try to make my speeches, and I'm thinking, okay, how do I not upset these people? Because they're really just, a lot of them are just here to have a nice little social event. And here I'm going to try to slide in some existential crises. Anyway, I don't want to totally interrupt your thought, but and I'm kind of losing my thought too, but let's just think about this pre-conversation. That might be the unique niche or niche, depending, I guess, how you pronounce that word, that this radish block party might need to be, because, now there's other people doing what you were doing in the social club, right? Like the Humanity Rising and all these other people are sort of basically, I would say, following in your footsteps, right? Because the Solution Club was several years ago when it began. And honest to God, as far as I'm concerned, this was the only place where anybody was saying, well, let's have the conversations about the fact that we're going down this crazy train out of control. And now there's a lot, right, happening on Zoom, but who's having the pre-conversation, about why are you guys nibbling around the edges as opposed to really getting serious and tackling these issues head on and up front, and not so anyway, maybe we just have to move along into the pre-conversation, and to that end, maybe we need to have people like Peter Kuznick and Oliver Stone, who have written, there's on YouTube, you can watch their multi-part series based on their book called The Untold History of the United States. And then, maybe William J. Perry, the man is getting pretty old, but maybe he'd come on. And because in a sense, there's nothing easier that should be able to be addressed than the fact that being afraid of each other is unnecessary in this world, and it's dangerous to be stoking fear of each other, and we have to come together and to start to get back to what Gorbachev and Reagan almost accomplished. They did dismantle thousands and thousands of nuclear missiles. There were about 35,000 missiles total back then. They brought them down to, I believe, something like about 4,000 today. Way more than enough to blow us up 10 times over. But anyway, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're good, Miles. Really good stuff. I got some comments, but So has her hand up, so go for it, So, followed by Jamen. Go for it, So.
Could you, so I forgot what I was going to say, but could you put those links in the chat, Miles, please?
Yes, sure, will do so.
And in the meantime, let me comment that I really like what you're saying, Miles. And here's where I'm netting out. I'm netting out on, those, I don't know if they make them anymore, but, you used to be able to go to the grocery store and get a block of Neapolitan ice cream, right? Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, right? 3 different layers. And so what I'm thinking that we can do is, Miles, you talked about, the kind of the focus of, like, hey, what if we were to focus on the pre-conversation? And what I'm saying is, let's focus on let's focus on 3 things. One is the pre-conversation, as you suggest. Why aren't we addressing this head on? Why are we nibbling around the edges? Why are we in such deep denial, even in the face of everything? The second is the conversation. And the third is on hyper solutions, which come out of the conversation. So it's 1, 2, 3, right? Pre-conversation, conversation, and hyper solutions. The current front runner for us for hyper solutions is OSS. A week from now, it may be something else, but there will always be a front runner, a number 1 and a number 2 and a number 3 in the world, in the rankings of hyper solutions, right? So anyway, that's where I'm at. Let's do all 3. Let's do the full, that's full stack, as they say in the world of software, full stack. I'm a full stack developer. Full stack, right? So, let's go full stack. Let's have the pre-conversation, let's have the conversation, and then let's talk hyper solutions, and then let's implement the very best one. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, life on Earth's about to go. Hyper solutions are the way to say no. My mommy told me to pick the very best one. Boom, let's implement that, right? But full stack, pre-conversation, per you, Miles, thank you, the conversation, and then hyper solutions. Like Shankar. Welcome back, Shankar. And go ahead, Sal.
I think it's Switzerland, there's a little video on YouTube, and there's an elderly man living in this tiny village, and the glacier that's nearby is melting, and he drapes sheets across this glacier every day, white sheets, so that he can get the albedo. And because it's such an ordinary guy just trying to protect his house, and then you look at the sheets, the soggy sheets, and it's one of the most poignant little vids, because I don't think anyone could go into denial after watching that. It's just extraordinary. So he's coming up with a solution, isn't he? This old guy. You know, it's his very personal story. He might not, for all I know, care about the bigger picture, but he's trying to protect his house. The glacier's melting. It's been there all his life. He's a very old man. So he gets these sheets and he drags them up there and he lays them down. I just think it's, have a look. Check it out, everybody.
Yeah, Shankar, just to bring you up to speed. So, you know, we were talking earlier about the conversation, how to save life on Earth, and then hyper solutions like OSS. Well, if we go back upstream from hyper solutions to the conversation, what happens before the conversation? We're calling it the pre-conversation. And the pre-conversation we're defining as, why are people avoiding the conversation? Like we took a look at Ubiquity University's Humanity Rising thing and their whole schedule and everything like that. And what we don't see is the conversation. In just real hard-hitting direct terms, how do we save life on Earth? Which for me is a conversation about, okay, let's come up with what are the different hyper solutions that people are proposing, and let's compare and contrast and find the very best one. Like, for example, let's say I wanted to go visit James in Ireland, right? And then So in England, right? I first have to figure out, am I going to sail across the Atlantic like Greta Thunberg did? Am I going to fly across in some hazmat suit so I don't die halfway across the Atlantic on an airplane? You know, do I, you know, trek it across the snow across the North Pole, and then I don't know, you know, but, you know, I first have to figure that out before I can even begin my damn journey. How am I going to get there? And these are hyper solutions. A jet plane is a hyper solution. A Greta Thunberg sailboat is a hyper solution. Trekking across the snow and skiing is a hyper solution, right? Teleporting via Zoom is a hyper solution. Hey, I'm in your house right now, James. Super cool. So you too. So, you know, but before I can even begin to get there, begin the journey, I need to have the frickin' conversation about which hyper solution are we gonna go with, or which combination of hyper solutions, right? Maybe I fly to New York and then take the sailboat from there. Whatever, right? You know, combination of hyper solutions. So, nowhere in Humanity Rising do we see anything that looks like the conversation. Hey, which hyper solution are we going to go with to save life on Earth? The conversation isn't happening, which has inspired us, and I'm going to read Miles's latest comment, which is about, let's have the pre-conversation. Why are we not having the conversation? In fact, the title to this video may well be, when I post it to YouTube, a gift to Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising, the conversation and the pre-conversation and hyper solutions or whatever, but let's get it on. Miles said the 24-hour block party could focus on the pre-conversation with guests like William J. Perry and other elders who have nothing to lose anymore. Love it. Oh, Shankar, we can't hear you. You're on mute. Go ahead. Okay, Shankar says, I see if we have used industrial level mass problem solving solutions, we could have solved all these problems. Absolutely. We could have solved this a long time ago with a combination of SRM and, you know, et cetera, including radical changes to our lifestyle, right? Why do we all strive to live in some giant mansion that has an entire universe of all of our needs met inside of this one big high carbon footprint envelope that required chopping down a buttload of trees to build, right? Well, because that's what everyone else is doing, and if I don't do that, I won't get laid. You know, look, come on. We know how to change the rules of a game. We've done it many times in the past in history. What we're talking about is being intentional about changing the rules of this game, including starting with the pre-conversation, right? What's been holding us back? So let's definitely let's go deep in there, but let's not stop there. Let's then proceed to have the conversation and model having the conversation. We can do it right now, right? My favorite hyper solution is OSS. What's yours? How do we save life on Earth? Any suggestions? Any ideas? Or is everyone as in love with OSS as I am?
I'm thinking that, is anybody got their hand up before I start talking again? I don't want to interrupt. So, you know, I'm thinking, so here I've got, you've met Dr. Joe Vipond. He's the physician, the emergency physician that I interviewed on the block party. He happened to be nearby, so he came over and everybody got to meet Joe Vipond. And he's also the president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. And I gave him Dr. Rao's white paper that industrial animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change. And I haven't heard back from him, but he's a very busy man. He's on the front line with COVID. So, but one of the things that this lawyer that I really admire, he's from Orange County, and he wrote this book, Social Media, The Ultimate Guide to Social Media for Business Owners, Professionals, and Entrepreneurs. Lots of great tips. And one of the things, though, it's not necessarily in this book, but he said that if somebody's being bullied, like if your child's being bullied at school, just right off the get-go, just write it up, all the facts in a letter, and send it to the school superintendent and the principal of the school as registered mail. And that puts people on notice that, you know, hey, I'm not, without delay, I'm putting everybody on notice that my child is being bullied and I want this addressed. And so it's people like, oh, they go like, oh, wow, registered mail. You're serving notice, is what he calls it. So, you know, like, pardon me, I'm using that word too much, but earlier today we were talking about preparing meals for a lot of people, and it occurred to me that the hospital system here where I live in Calgary provides a lot of meals every day in the hospitals to sick people. And I thought, hey, why are they serving pork chops? Why are they serving unhealthy food? So I would think that that would be grounds to say, if what the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine is saying is true, that eating all this animal meat and dairy is unhealthy, by registered mail, I'm sending this question to Alberta Health Services. Why is unhealthy food being served in a hospital? Can we have the conversation about why unhealthy food is being served to people in hospitals? And then, you know, by registered mail, please, I'm telling you that I'm wanting an answer. Now, if I don't hear back from them, then it would have to be, okay, I guess we need to have the pre-conversation. Why are you not talking to me? And again, so, and then just thinking about Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, same thing. They do have the Eat Lancet report in their website. You have to dig for it. Eat Lancet. Lancet is a medical peer-reviewed journal, and it's not about shutting down animal agriculture, meat and dairy and eggs, but it does basically, from what I read, say it's not healthy food. So I would need to ask, why is it that any environmental group doesn't have meat, dairy as top of mind discussion as to climate change, you know, and pandemics and zoonotic disease and all this conversation that's not happening? Thank you.
Yeah, love it, love it. And, you know, the pre-conversation that you said, hey, why are you not responding to my, you know, previous communication? That could also be through registered mail, right? Et cetera. And I'm actually getting inspired now to send registered mail to Mr. Garrison, the organizer of Humanity Rising, sending him registered mail and saying, why is it that you are not addressing head on the conversation? How do we save life on Earth in the following terms? And here we've created a whole video addressing this in much more detail that a bunch of us on 3 different continents put together, and here it is. All right. Love to hear from you and love to help you organize the conversation on Humanity Rising. Let's do it together. We're here to help, right? Let's do it. And we're also offering to create a space to have the pre-conversation. Basically, okay, Humanity Rising, we're not ready to have the conversation yet, so let's talk about that. We're afraid. And also, we're having a hard time imagining all this privilege going away. We're having a hard time imagining dying.
And about Humanity Rising, do they have industrial animal abuse, meat and dairy?
No, I didn't notice anything. No, I didn't notice anything about that. It's much more soft stuff. It's like, you know, bring Charles Eisenstein out of the closet and have him, you know, hold his hands together and say namaste and, you know, do his normal, you know, bullshit. I've got his book here, by the way, his latest book. I've got all his books, but his latest is, you know, Climate, a New Story. And he talks about Guy McPherson, you know, deep into the book, and essentially kind of writes him off, right? Well, that's an outlier. Look, he's not facing reality, right? I think Charles's approach to Humanity Rising is, you know, book sales rising. Let me get in there, give some talks, impress a bunch of people with how eloquent I am, and sell some more books. It's book sales rising, right? Income rising.
Jamen, would you read out that? Have you got the book there? Could you read out that passage where this is Guy McPherson?
I'll go get it.
I feel furious. I feel furious about this.
Yeah, I'm furious too.
I did think when I saw, because I was recommended Charles Eisenstein by a friend, and I just thought he was. I hate myself for saying this almost, but I just thought, what a quack! You know, he's going around selling potions. You know, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
You know,
let me get the book. I'll be right back.
What are they called? You know, these people that sell these poisons in a bottle as medicine. What's the name for that? That's what I thought. I just thought this is more opiate of the people stuff. When it was like the conversation was going round and round and round and round, and you know, it was like a yoga wash. You know, I don't need yoga wash in my life. As in greenwash, I don't need greenwash. I don't need yoga wash. I don't need anything wash. Give me the truth. Give me the facts. You know, even if they're a bit ugly, give me the facts.
Yeah, well, and that's right, because when we think about it, if Dr. Rao's white paper is correct, and Goodland and Anghang as well, that industrial animal agriculture is the leading cause of global warming, and now we're knowing it's also the leading cause of zoonotic disease.
So the Guy McPherson references, let me find them.
While you're looking for that, I just was responding to Jamen. I was just responding to
So, page 56.
I don't know if Jamen can hear us.
Yeah. Okay.
The first thing he says, so just to give it some context, this first reference, it's chapter 3, the climate spectrum and beyond, right? I'm going to give a Jamen cynical subtext. It's a popularity contest. Let's see which perspective is the most popular and why. You know, what is this, Hollywood Weekly? All right, so the climate spectrum and beyond, and it says, you know, which side am I on? And so he's got basically like the main, you know, the bright lines on the spectrum, shall we say? You know, what are the leading, you know, the leading perspectives on climate? So here they are. Number 1, climate change skepticism. Oh, great. Let's start with that, Charles. Yeah, that's important. Let's talk about that. I assume you all can hear me okay. I just put my earbuds back in, thanks. So number 2, techno-optimism. You know, we've been hearing about that for decades. Can we get over that? 3, climate orthodoxy. Oh, let me read this. Climate orthodoxy. The burning of fossil fuels poses a grave threat to humanity and the planet. If we do not act quickly to cut emissions and limit warming to 2 degrees C, the future will bring rising sea level. This is denialism. Climate orthodoxy. It's oh, we just cut emissions and everything will be fine. Give me a break. Number 4, climate justice and systems change, right? You know, it's a bunch of PC stuff. This viewpoint is a step toward deeper radicalism, you know. Heaven forbid we should deal with the asteroid that's hurtling towards Earth, Charles. Let's talk about this viewpoint is a step towards deeper radicalism. Great, let's spend the next 100 years pondering that. And then last, subtext least, climate catastrophism. Ugh, even the name sounds so distasteful. Ugh, rather like bitter tea with no sweetener. Horrid. This viewpoint basically says that it is already too late to prevent catastrophic climate change. Oh, these unfortunate people who get so catastrophic in their thinking. They must have gotten banged on the head when they were little children. It's too late to prevent catastrophic climate change, except perhaps with an immediate response far beyond anything that is politically conceivable today. And perhaps not even then. The more moderate prognosticators foresee a dramatic collapse of society, a population crash, socio-political upheaval, and a major regress in technological levels. Those on the more extreme end predict temperature rises of 6 to 10 degrees centigrade within the next few decades, which would mean the end of civilization and possibly the extinction of the human species. Some, such as Guy McPherson, predict human extinction within 10 years. You know, so he's just like at the tail end of the most extreme radical freak show. He drags out Guy McPherson. Let me see what else he says about Guy. Anything more here? Oh, and then he says, what could possibly unite such disparate viewpoints? I mean, so this is where he's at. This is sociology 101. Heaven forbid we should deal with the asteroid hurtling towards Earth, Charles. Okay, now let me read.
Jamen.
Next. Yeah, Miles.
Jamen, so what we have been hearing is a whole lot of pages of esoteric, I think is the word, just a lot of words, flowery words, and sociology. As Sol was saying while you went looking for that book, she says, yeah, she just wants the truth. And indeed, if Dr. Rao's white paper is correct, and he's more than willing to debate it with anybody, then all those words that you were just reading, to a large part, become unnecessary, because if industrial meat and dairy is the leading cause of climate change and a big part of the solution, next is solar radiation management in, ASAP, as you've been saying. But if the truth is that simply by everyone writing their next grocery list without meat and dairy on it changes the world, then that guy is out of business, to a large extent, right? But as long as we are not having the conversation, it's business as usual. Slaughterhouses are spreading disease, killing disadvantaged workers with zoonotic COVID-19, and the machine grinds on. But it's Dr. Rao. So his proposal, if it's true, is a dramatic, easily implemented solution. But it needs all these experts, all these doctors, all these scientists say, yeah, he's right, and we need to stop meat and dairy.
You've hit the nail on the head, Miles. Basically, there's not much money in the solution side of things. You just got to keep eking out the problem. That book, Jamen, I would like you to measure it. How many centimeters thick is that book? I'm going to call it pulp wisdom. Pay me by the centimeter for waffling on. And when you could have said it in a two-liner, the end of the world is nigh. You could have. I'm more than Jehovah's Witnesses on this one.
It's 277 pages of bullshit. And here, let me read the second reference to Guy McPherson. It's under a section. This is now like 12 pages later, and it's in a section called "The End of the World." A politically progressive friend described her experience of spending a week with her in-laws, who consumed a steady diet of Fox News. By the end of the week, she said, she understood how it seemed to them that anyone who voted for Hillary Clinton must be an idiot. The conservative media creates its own reality bubble. Okay, so now we're in the realm of reality bubbles. The same might be said for the world of climate skepticism and for its mirror opposite, the world of climate catastrophism. These are just different reality bubbles, right? None of them are objective. I encourage the reader to spend some time in each of these reality bubbles. Oh, how enlightened and PC of you, Charles. Anchored with scientists and writers like Guy McPherson, Paul Ehrlich, Paul Beckwith, David Wallace Wells, and Malcolm Light, the catastrophist camp criticizes mainstream climate science along many of the same lines as the skeptics do. Well, how fascinating, Charles. Heaven forbid we should deal with the actual asteroid heading towards Earth. Let's look at these different perspectives. And it's really interesting that Guy McPherson has something in common with Fox News. That's worthy of a paper in itself. Maybe I'll write another book about that and make another $1 million. Thank you. Well, let's read on. It says that scientists ignore data that doesn't fit their worldview or for which they are psychologically unprepared. Even when they do realize, well, anyway, bottom line, he's just, he doesn't, there's no there. He doesn't say, look, here's what's up. We're overheating exponentially. We've got to slam on the brakes. Cutting emissions and stopping eating meat isn't going to get there fast enough. We need the big guns of SRM. That's it. That's the reality. You know, wake up, Charles. Yo, Charles. Whoa, wake up. Right?
And it's also like the Calgary Climate Hub, this local climate organization that tries to go drum up membership at $50 a piece. And yet the three things that they came up with: free public transit in the city, that buildings the city builds should be those environmentally leading type structures, and that they want to have some input in how any money that the city puts towards climate initiatives, they have a say on how to spend. Where's the meat and dairy shutting it down? Or, let's talk about Dr. Rao's report. Let's talk about meat and dairy. Maybe jumping ahead for anybody to say we're really going to shut it down before they've talked about it. But you know what I mean? But these people they don't want to even have the conversation. So the pre-conversation, as you said, we've got to start using registered mail. When they fail to respond, another letter, registered mail. Okay, why are you not responding to me? And document, archive, and say everybody's on notice. Dr. Rao wants to debate his paper, and one way or another, people are going to be exposed for not taking up the challenge if they call themselves academics. Get out of your ivory towers and get down to the people and the truth.
Exactly. I mean, as you said there in that statement there, Jamen, psychologically unable or incapable of dealing with the issues. That's just a very simple way of what we're saying here. They're just too frightened to talk about the truth. Psychologically incapable is just a fancy way of saying we're too afraid to talk about the truth. So we'll prance around all the edges of it, but we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty.
But there's something that they're going to lose by telling that truth, and that is the job, the status, the book deal, the talk tour. There is something in it. It's the bigger house. It's the conferences in Switzerland where they can go on a jolly. It's always economic. It's a question of economics, as the tramp said when he was picking up a cigarette butt. It's a question of economics.
It's a question of. Go ahead, Jim.
Sorry, Jim. If those are the hindrances holding these people back from having the actual conversation when they are in the know, then they're just a bunch of hypocrites as far as I'm concerned. Because if they're in the know, but the idea of losing, prestige or anything else, look, it's all nice having prestige and having trophies on the mantelpiece. But what if the mantelpiece is fucking melting away and you can't even balance the trophies on it anymore? There's no point. Prestige and career are going out the window with the climate, you know what I mean, and everything else. So there's no time for any of that anymore. None of that matters anymore. What matters is the conversation and getting the thing sorted out.
Yeah, exactly. And the reality is that the conversation properly had, which is an ongoing thing, it's a process, but properly had, the conversation makes books like this obsolete. Why? This book would be obsolete the day it's written. Why? Because you'd have a conversation and you'd put it on the table and then you'd progress from there, right? This is bringing people back to a snapshot in time of, 13 months ago or whenever the hell this book was written, right? Of whatever his thinking was at the time. It's a bedtime story. It's the kind of thing to lull you to sleep. Oh, I'm sure glad that smart people like Charles Eisenstein are thinking about all this. That gives me hope that we'll figure out a way through. He's just selling more books and going on more tours. I met him face to face. I offered that we work together to build collective intelligence to figure this out. He blew me off. But it's not about me. It's about the conversation already. That'll make all this crap obsolete. Let's have the conversation. And it'll lead to one of two conclusions. Either there is a hyper solution that can get us out of the death spiral, or we're going down and there's no way to get back out. Right? I think that's what people are afraid of. They're afraid of they're afraid of either of those scenarios. One, of some hyper solution now that they now need to give themselves to because it's the only game in town, or the other, that there is no way out to safety and we're all going to die. I think they're afraid of both of those. I'm not sure which one they're more afraid of. And so what's the world doing? It's floating around, reading books, bedtime stories, and watching these well-heeled speakers give really nice talks. That was a very interesting talk. So I thought that talk that Charles just delivered was very interesting. I thought that was very insightful about how he made the comparison to like Fox News and Guy McPherson. I thought that was really good. Didn't you think so? Yeah. Hello. And then also, I think this fetish with the United Nations and its Millennium Development Goals, it's like it's like wanting to fucking believe in Santa Claus. It's wanting to believe that the United Nations has this figured out, and thank goodness we've got the United Nations, New York with all their flags, Geneva, thank God we have the United Nations. We might as well be praying to God. We're praying to the United Nations to save us.
You know
It's
that
a baby's comforter.
sorry. You know
It's a
in that
baby's
book.
comforter.
You know in that book, Jamen, he's got the categories, the catastrophizers and the other bunch, the various bubbles. But if starvation from mass crop failure isn't a catastrophe, then what is? I'm binning Charles Eisenstein now. That big pulp wisdom quasi-Bible rubbish is going straight in the bin. My friend who's been taken in by him, sorry, Karen, you're on the wrong track there. This guy is another snake oil guy.
And it's the warm blanket believe in Santa Claus effect, right? Except we're believing kind of in multiple Santa Clauses. We believe in the Santa Claus of the United Nations. They're going to solve it. How could they not solve it? They're this big United Nations. Oh, Charles Eisenstein, he's so smart and he thinks so deeply about this. And even before he begins his talk, he puts his hands together and it's like he's so reverential. I believe in Charles Eisenstein. Like, we want to believe that there are these smart people out there who have it figured out, right? Just like we want to believe in God or believe in Santa Claus or believe in whatever helps you go to bed at night. Oh yeah, thanks Miles for your reminder that we're about to get, that we'll get bounced soon. I actually, things are so tight technically that I actually didn't have to start this meeting a half an hour before 6 a.m. I started it just a few minutes before. So we'll get booted literally probably a couple of minutes before, in about a half an hour from now, we'll get booted. When we do get booted, just re-enter the room. And we'll all be right back, and it'll be probably just in time for the countdown at that point. Don't tell anyone, but I pretty much started right on time, or maybe a minute late. We may get booted after the countdown, but we'll still come back. I'll come back, even if it's after the countdown.
We give you know, we're quite kind really to these snake oil salesmen. You know, you give them the benefit of doubt and all the rest of it, but there's that guy willfully sneering everybody else's little piece of the jigsaw puzzle that they're exploring, and having no compunction, it seems. You know, happily, you know, writing his big pulp wisdom stuff. But he's willing to disc Guy McPherson and put him into some little side bubble, and yet we are quite nervous about being disrespectful to him. But why? You should just, you know, nice is dangerous sometimes. You know that nice is dangerous.
Totally agree. So Miles has his hand up, and I want to welcome Charles. Welcome back, Charles. We're in the middle of a pretty interesting conversation, which I'll fill you in on in a second. And
Howdy.
Hey, Charles, go for it, Miles.
Well, I'll be very quick. I think James also wanted to say something, but I know Shankar can't reply because his audio problems, but for the climate healers people, the Vegan World 2026 people who are actively involved on the base camp and the projects, Shankar, may I suggest that you use that approach of registered mail to send out Dr. Rao's white paper in a formal manner and putting everybody and anybody on notice that here's Dr. Rao's white paper. Please respond with your thoughts and comments. And you know, as an academic or a doctor or a scientist, you know, we need your input, and that's, you know, putting them on notice that you expect them to do their professional duty and respond to the content of Dr. Rao's white paper. Keep a registry of the registered letters, the registered mail, and again, include Dr. Rao is wanting to debate anybody and everybody on this subject. And if they don't respond, again, the registered mail. I think registered mail maybe only costs I'm guessing a few dollars for a basic letter, but it means they have to sign for it at their side. And in fact, when there's like safety notices about a product, companies, it's expected practice that notice of a product flaw is sent out with registered mail. So it's I think a very important tool to use. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I didn't really want to say anything. I was just jumping in with what Jamen was saying a while ago. I was saying that, you know, about baby soother kind of a situation. But if you're having problems with your sound there, Shankar, I had as well. I usually do some mornings. For some reason my mic won't work. I just leave the party and come back in again via the link, and when I come back in, the sound seems to rectify itself. So you might try that, leave and come back again straight away, and it might correct itself. It usually does for me anyway.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'd like to offer to do a brief recap for Charles and really for all of us. Let me stop the present recording and start a fresh one, so we get a fresh recap at the beginning of the next recording. All right. Stopping now. And Nolan, is that cool with you, or do you need? Okay. Stopping in 3, 2, 1.